This next topic is one that makes me really uncomfortable to talk about it, but we have to talk about it because everyone is talking about it right now. And it's the 80-20 rule. This is a rule of incels online who believe that 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. The phrase apparently comes from economics. It's from an Italian economist who observed at the beginning of the 20th century that just 20% of Italians owned 80% of land. But in recent years, incels have really grabbed hold of this, and they use this theory to justify why they deserve sex from women, because they say that 20% of men are alphas or chads in their parlance, and they get all the sexual opportunities, while the 80% of men who are not chads don't get any love from women, and therefore they can coerce women into sex.
So it's like the 80-20 rule of you wear 20% of your clothes 80% of the time.
It's like that,
except
but
with
sort of more
incels
depressing.
and depressing.
Yeah. And the reason why suddenly everyone's talking about the 80-20 rule is because of this show on Netflix called Adolescence. This show has triggered a huge conversation about the radicalization of young men, how they turn into incels, why young men are committing violence against women, why misogynistic violence is on the rise. I haven't watched this show. I don't think I ever will watch it. But I'm grateful to the star and co-writer of the show, Stephen Graham, because I think he has kicked off a very important conversation about a world that not a lot of us know a lot about. I want to share with you a clip of him on Jimmy Fallon's show recently talking about why he made the show.
It's a young boy who kills a young girl. I'm not doing any spoilers because we found out straight away. And as a collective, we didn't want it to be a whodunit. We wanted it to be more of a why he did it. Do you know what I mean? So what we kind of did was, I read an article in the paper. It was about a young boy who stabbed a young girl to death. And then there was a couple of months later on the news, there was a piece about a young boy who stabbed a young girl to death. And these were at opposite ends of the country. And I just, if I'm really honest with you, Jim, I just, it hurt my heart. And I just think, what kind of a society we're living in at the moment where young boys are stabbing young girls? And that beautiful saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, I just thought, what if we're all kind of accountable? The education system, parenting, the community, the government. And also, when we were kids, we didn't have social media. So if we were in our rooms, when we were kids, we were either playing out in the streets, weren't we? Or we were in our rooms, like drawing pictures or playing keyboards or something. We didn't have the accessibility to all of this stuff in the world that really influences young minds. And I wanted to take a look at it. I'm not blaming anyone. I just thought maybe we're all accountable and we should, have a conversation about it.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it's really great. You're right.
Hol, you're braver than Amelia or I. You watched it immediately, as did Jessie, and everyone's talking to you about it and you want to talk about it. What are they saying? Like, what are the things that people are taking away from this show?
So I think that the reason that something like the 80-20 rule that we decided to talk about today is being passed around, and there is some other intel in this show from the secret language of emojis, for example. I think what a lot of people are taking from this show is they want to share intel. They want to understand if they can do anything, if they've got children. I think we talked about this, Mia, but I think how you're reacting to adolescence probably has a lot to do with your life stage, right? Because Jessie recommended the show on Friday. It is an outstanding show. I also have to do a shout out for hearing an accent like that on an American talk show.
Yeah, you don't often,
because
right?
This is a sidebar, but British creatives usually talk like this.
They do.
Right. He's a working class man from the north of England, and he has made one of the most important pieces of television to be made in 10 years. Because the thing about this show is, and he goes on to say in that, he didn't have answers. It's not a show with like neat answers and things tied up in bows. But what it does is it reflects a whole cultural moment. And I think back to the life stage bit, if you've got a child in that demo, a 13-year-old boy, and obviously I do, and I have a 15-year-old girl, so teenagers, or you have kids who are younger and coming up to that space, it's not new to say that one of the things we mostly freak out about and parents talk about more than anything else is technology, right? Phones, social media, input, and influence. And one of the things that this show does so brilliantly in episode 2, and I won't go into lots of detail because if you're not watching, it's not interesting, but basically the policeman who is investigating this murder, his teenage son explains to him, because the police are looking at all this evidence, they're talking to the kids and the kids aren't telling them anything. And they're looking at comments on social media and they're going, there doesn't seem to be anything here. And then one of the policeman's teenage son kind of translates some of the comments for him. So someone would put the 80-20 thing and the 100% and some other little
the
things
emoji,
like emojis,
mean,
a pill and an exploding this and that, and explains that that's kind of coded language of the manosphere and also of the girls using that language back at the boys as an insult, like calling them an incel and so on as an insult. So I think for a lot of parents, they're like clinging on to this like information, we can try and protect ourselves from this. And then I think if you're in a different phase of your life, you can just watch this show as a remarkable piece of television because, as is famously discussed, every episode is in one take. This acting is amazing. It doesn't offer all those neat little solutions we're used to in a TV drama. But I think I haven't seen a show take hold of people like this for such a long time because I think it's grabbed hold of our biggest fears and we're swimming in this awful news at the moment. At the weekend, there was an enormous amount of coverage of the Lily James inquest, who was a young woman murdered 2 years ago in Sydney. And the man who killed her took his own life, so we never got answers from him. But there's been an inquest, and a lot of the similar themes come through, even though these people were in their early 20s. Rejection, the idea
she broke up with him.
Yeah, she wasn't as keen on him as he was on her, and that's also a theme in adolescence. Internet stalking, tracking people's whereabouts, what people say about each other on social media. It all feels of a piece. And we're all just really frightened. And I think this show has kind of opened a bit of a window for us to be able to go, what are we doing?
But did it make you feel dismay? That's why I don't think I can bring myself to watch it.
And distress and despair.
Definitely. In fact, I had to watch it in bits. So I said this to you guys last week because me and Jessie were talking about it. I was like, oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. And then I got halfway through the third episode and I had to stop because I literally was getting very distressed. But I also think that some things are important enough that we have to sit in our discomfort about them, right? Like a lot of things are. And the thing that's interesting about this is now it's broken out into this mainstream conversation. I mean, Stephen Graham says, I wanted to have a conversation about what if we're all accountable, which is a very big question. The problem is a lot of it always comes back to phones, which feels like this insoluble problem. Don't let your kid have too much access unfettered. This idea that Jonathan Haidt talks about, that we're over-parenting in real life and under-parenting in digital life.
What I often think is the hardest thing for our generation of parents, and sometimes I feel like I'm a little bit of a bridge between old parenting and new parenting, because I had most of my kids quite a while ago. It was before this. It was before the manosphere. It was before Andrew Tate. It was, I've got a teenage son still, but that really vulnerable age of like tween and teen, things were just different then when my kids were younger. But we've got the first generation of parents who are parenting for issues that they never experienced. So when I was growing up and you were growing up, Gen Xers were growing up, it was like, yeah, we did all the same naughty shit that our parents did. Drugs, alcohol, sex, all of those kinds of things, skipping school. And our parents, it just wasn't any different. So they could, in part make rules because they had lived experience of the things we were doing. Not only do we not have lived experience of this stuff, we don't even understand the words. And it's also invisible to us. So it's not even as if we can really learn about it, because you can't. Like, I don't know, you can watch a movie like this, but of course half of that, the emojis and everything, all of and the terminology, that'll all be out of date. And it will evolve and evolve and evolve. So it's like this secret, talk about the underground world underneath the pyramids, that's happening in the lives of our children that we have no idea about.
And also, as the technology has evolved, the challenges have intensified. See, when I was growing up in the 90s, I'm sure listeners who grew up at the same time can relate to this, there was one big family computer, and it was either in the corner of the living room or in one of your parents' studies, and it was this enormous thing, and you couldn't go in there surreptitiously. You would first of all have to dial up the
Someone
internet.
would have to get off the
Everyone
phone
would hear
so
the
that you
sounds,
could,
and then you'd get on. But that said, kids kids are resourceful. I have to say that when I was on the internet in the 90s, I was going to chat rooms and talking to people. My parents had no idea. Yeah. But the difference is, I guess, that's just ramped up even more since then.
It's true, and it's interesting because obviously you can be semi-literate, to your point, Mia, that there's a whole language we don't understand, which I think is why a lot of parents are seizing on the details of this show. There's a whole language you don't understand. And if you're semi-literate, sometimes it can be clumsier than if you don't understand it at all. My son will be watching YouTube shorts and I'll be like, what's that about? And he'll be like, it's about Minecraft. And I'm like, is it though? Or are you being radicalized by the manosphere? There's probably coded messages in this that I don't understand. And you're like, and then you're and parenting from a place of fear is never a good place to parent from.
My son was listening he got in the car the other day and my Bluetooth picked up his phone and he was listening to a podcast and I was like, what's this podcast about? I was the same. Is it someone radicalizing you? What are they talking about?
But how do we avoid the moral panic? Because hasn't every parenting generation thought that there was something profoundly wrong or worrisome about what their children were consuming or listening to? Didn't parents say in the 60s that the Beatles had long hair and maybe were taking drugs and corrupting their children?
I think that's all true. And I generally am very much on the let's not panic bandwagon, because I think that, the vast majority of kids are not doing awful things to each other. The vast majority of males and females in relationships are not doing awful things to each other. But there is no question that there is a rising influence that is almost invisible to the naked eye that we're always really shocked to stumble across. So when you find out how many followers Andrew Tate has, for example, and he's just one of the names we know, the mainstream knows, you're always like, what? And when you find out that he's being flown on a jet back into America. It's kind of all very jolting. And I think that you don't want to panic, but at the same time, you have to be alert. It's a lot of the same information that parents share around about technology generally, that returning to a time of a computer in the lounge room, Amelia, it might be impossible, but it's still quite a good idea to keep the computer's big screens somewhere public, to make sure you talk to your kids about it, even though they do not want to talk to you about it. It's very clear. And, it's very confusing. Do you two think, having seen the scale of this show and its influence, are you tempted to watch it now?
Oh, no, I'd hate that. Seriously, I just won't. And I know what you mean. It's like sometimes we have to sit in our discomfort and we have to know. I feel like with so many things, you can get a sense of it without watching the thing itself.
It sort of reminds me of how I love horror movies. I love reading the Wikipedia plot synopses of horror movies.